Hi guys, I'm at a Holiday Inn in West Covina, California. I feel like that TikTok meme that's like, "Hello, princess, welcome to Genovia," because my view is just well from that window. It's just like random buildings, but from the other window, it's highways and chain restaurants. But I'm here because my brother's graduating, so um, let's see. I lost my okay, so I brought my book on the plane, even though I didn't have a carry-on. So I had one tote bag, and I made room for the power broker. But unfortunately, I did lose my place, so I have to turn the pages. But it was chapter 24, driving. Also, I'm sipping on like the worst coffee known to man from the hotel lobby. I used to not be a snob. I don't think I'm that much of a snob now even. But hotel coffee is just like one step below what I typically consume. If you have any recommendations of things to do in West Covina, California, please let me know. It's like far enough away from Los Angeles that it sucks. And I don't really know what to do while I'm here, but my brother's graduating. That'll be really fun. And last night we watched House Hunters as a family for like a really long time, for like maybe 2 hours because it was so fun. And even just like sitting in a hotel room watching House Hunters was fun. So it'll probably be fine. Okay. Always time had pursued Moses hotly. Now it panted at his very heels. His dream now was to remake a city, but the city itself would obviously never be able to finance its own remaking. Only the federal government possessed sufficient resources, and there was no guarantee that those resources would continue to be made available for the purpose. In fact, there was more reason to suppose they would not, for every upswing in the economy brought a corresponding rise in the outcry for a cutback in work relief from the predominantly conservative press and from conservatives in Congress. The president, whose belief in the balanced budget was dying hard, continually wavered himself. In 1936, during another upswing, he ordered a stretch out in the spending of already allocated work relief funds. Good news for the nation was therefore bad news for Moses. Every upswing in the economy spelled a downswing in his hopes. And the disappearances of CWA on 48 hours' notice in 1934 had taught him how quickly those hopes could be dashed altogether. Moses knew that the opportunity presented by the 4.8 billion WPA program might disappear at almost any time, and a similar opportunity might never present itself again. He couldn't allow anything or anybody in the city to stand in his way or to slow him down. And he used the same forces that were so effective in dealing with the city's mayor, influence with state and federal governments, immense personal popularity, tactics he had perfected on Long Island, to make sure that nobody would. The rest of the city's government might have slowed him down. Obeying and following the complex laws and procedures set forth in the city's 3,000-page charter and administrative code would have slowed the pace of Moses's building. But the special powers he had written in the Park Department Unification Act exempted him from many of the charter's restrictions, and he ignored or circumvented most of the others. Under the charter, for example, the design of every public structure had to be submitted to and approved by the Municipal Art Commission. Moses submitted the designs for his structures on the very day that their construction was beginning, so that by the time the commission got around to considering them, they were finished. That government's appointed officials, sworn to uphold a law that Moses was violating in spirit or letter, and determined to live up to their oath, might have slowed him down. But he didn't let them. I need more of this terrible, terrible hotel coffee. I slept it. Sorry, I'm just blabbing, but I yeah, I find it really hard to do 3-hour time changes, like from Eastern time to Pacific time. But this morning, I naturally woke up so late. So maybe I've already switched, which is actually bad news because I'm only staying for 2 days. His usual technique with an insufficiently compliant departmental official was to demand that he be fired. Yeah, we're in a Holiday Inn, maybe? Let's see. It's probably on the cup. Yes, yes. That's crazy that you recognize that. Tell me how you did that. Do you have the like layout of different hotel chains memorized? You should become like the GeoGuessr guy, but for hotels. On more than one occasion, his usual technique with an insufficiently compliant departmental official was to demand that he be fired. Moses would attempt to convince the department's commissioner to do so by confidentially revealing to him damaging personal information dug up by his bloodhounds. And if they hadn't been able to dig up any, Moses invented some. That's so crazy. So the people that are following the rules, Moses will just like make up something about them. Evil, evil, evil. He insinuated, for example, that an assistant corporation counsel who had angered him with his refusal to proceed with a legal case against residents of land adjoining a park site was a drunk. On more than one occasion, the technique worked. If it did not, Moses simply stepped up the pressure another notch. He refused to deal with the official involved or to allow any of his aides to deal with him. This tactic brought the relationship between the park department and the other department involved to a halt. Wait. Okay, so he's just ghosting the people that are telling him to follow the rules. It brought the thing to a halt until the commissioner agreed to shift his offending subordinate to a post in which he did not deal with the park department and to replace him with a more amenable individual. It was a tactic that brought weak-spined commissioners to their knees in short order, and it even worked with Windels. The Corporation Council, at first, refused to fire or shift his drunk assistant, but Moses sent him a telegram stating, "I have given orders that no one is to discuss any matter under my jurisdiction with him." Windels sent back a telegram of his own. "The manner in which legal matters arising from the work of your department are to be handled by my department will be determined by me." But Moses refused to relent, and the Corporation Council realized that he could not allow park development to be stalled by a dispute over one individual. He shifted the assistant to another assignment. If a commissioner still resisted, Moses used the public rather than private smear. Quote, "Mr. Moses told me that he was able to control the press of New York City so as to hold me up to such I don't know this word, obloquy, obloquoy. It feels like a word I should know. It's strong public criticism or verbal abuse. Obloquy. Hold me up to such obloquy that I would not be able to stand it. W. Kingsland Macy had testified a decade before. The smear technique that had been used then was used now frequently. In the hands of a man for whom the press acted as a gigantic sounding board, repeatedly repeating and amplifying his words, the smear was a terrible weapon, particularly when those words were as caustic and cutting as Moses's. At Yale, his poetry had revealed an undeniable gift for language. During the decades since Yale, Moses had turned this gift from imagery to invective, and that invective had been honed by years of use to an edge as cruelly sharp as that of a razor with a jagged edge. I want them to publish his poetry in like a Rupi Kaur style book with little like illustrations. That could be fun. And Moses used that razor to strike straight for the jugular, not an opponent's issues or arguments, but his reputation. For most public men, Prominent on the list of hurts that pierce the heart, that sear the soul, is the hurt of coming to the breakfast table one morning and seeing harsh black headlights, call them fools or liars or hack bureaucrats or crooks. Headlines based on charges by a man regarded as a genius who was always right, and followed by an article that made the charges seem true, even if they were false. Herbert Lehman's advisors had been able to laugh off Moses' smears because they were famous men with established reputations, and because Moses' accusations against them had been specific and therefore refutable by publication of the facts. But the minor officials on whom Moses now employed the smear technique were more vulnerable, but particularly since Moses, having learned perhaps from the gubernatorial campaign, usually smeared not now with specific charges, but with generalizations, with labels, such as politician or bureaucrat, that conjured up vague but unpleasant connotations in readers' minds, and which, being vague, were difficult to disprove, so difficult, in fact, that his victims were effectively denied recourse even to libel suits. That seems not good. Deputy Comptroller Douglas Mathewson, for example, was only doing his duty as legal advisor to the Sinking Fund Commission when he informed it in a memorandum that Moses's demands. Hold on, the book is kind of far away from where I'm reading. I'm propping it up. Okay, there we go. Better for my eyes. Okay, so Douglas Mathewson. He informed in a memorandum that Moses's demand. What? Okay, this is a difficult sentence. I'm so sorry that I'm tripping up on this. One more time. Deputy Comptroller Douglas Mathewson, for example, was only doing his duty as legal advisor to the Sinking Fund Commission when he informed it in a memorandum that Moses's demand that it, the commission, transfer to the Park Department a tract of land in Coney Island belonging to the Board of Education was illegal. The charter, Mathewson pointed out, clearly provided that the commission could make permanent transfers only subject to approval of the Board of Estimate, and that even the board could act only after formally asking all other city departments if they needed the property, so that it could be guided in assigning land by an overall view of departmental needs. Unfortunately for Mathewson, however, while he believed that his memorandum was routine, it struck at the heart of Moses's method of operation. The park commissioner didn't want the Board of Estimate or anyone else taking an overall view of departmental needs, because if they did, they would realize that the park department was obtaining a wholly disproportionate share of city-owned land, and, more important, was obtaining land for which other departments were even then planning to use, as was, in fact, the case with the tract in question. The Board of Education was planning a badly needed school on the Coney Island site. Moses wanted to work too fast for other departments to defend against his land raids only through the malleable Sinking Fund Commission. When, as the result of Mathewson's memo, the commission delayed action on Moses's request, and when Mathewson's boss, Comptroller McGoldrick, refused to obey Moses's demand that he fire his subordinate, Moses called in reporters. Telling them that the only questions involved were procedural, he said, "If Mathewson's theory is to prevail, politics would come in. Can you imagine when the public would have parks if they had to wait for all this red tape? Are the old hacks or red tape boys going to hold things up?" At the commission's next meeting, the transfers Moses wanted were quickly approved, with McGoldrick voting for them, and thereby against his subordinate. Okay, so he's just he's really just smearing people's names in the press whenever they disagree with him. Mathewson sat through the meeting without a word. Shortly thereafter, the old hack and red tape boy quietly resigned. One of a score of minor officials publicly ridiculed and humiliated by Moses and driven out of public service for no other reason than that they had tried to make him obey the law. I'm having a sip of coffee now. If an official refused to resign and his boss refused to fire him, even after Moses' smear tactics had made him a political liability, there was still another notch on the Moses pressure gauge. The liability could be escalated. In 1935, this was easy for okay, I'm so excited to watch him become absolutely evil and crazy. It's crazy because I'm like almost halfway, nearly halfway. And so far, he's been a little crazy, but yeah, usually for reasons. The only times he doesn't have reasons are unusual, like demolishing the Central Park Casino. Okay, I'm excited for this. By 1935, this was easy, for 1935 marks the height of nationwide hysteria over the Red Peril. William Randolph Hearst was hoarsely, as in a hoarse voice, alerting America to the infiltration of the White House by liberal professors who had made the New Deal more communistic than the communist. Operatives of the demagogue publisher's Journal American were posing as Columbia University students to entrap professors into radical remarks. Whoa. So they're saying, like, I'm from Columbia. What do you think about this? And then the professor says something, and then they frame it as it's really as if it's radical. The House Un-American Activities Committee was probing WPA theater projects. Quote, now this Christopher Marlowe, demanded the honorary Joe Starnes of Alabama. Is he a communist type too? And when Diego Rivera refused to remove from his mural in the gleaming new lobby of Rockefeller Center a likeness of Lenin glaring down on a scene of American police clubbing strikers, young Nelson Rockefeller ordered the artist down off his scaffold, handed him a check to wind up his contract, and had the half-finished work covered with tar paper. And the nation's hysteria provided Moses with a new set of labels. Commie, Bolshevik, left-winger, more damning in the American public consciousness than even hack politician or red tape boy. And therefore, in the arsenal of the smear, perhaps the ultimate weapon. Okay. Moses applied these labels generously, branding them not only onto labor leaders, quote, radical left wing, and New Deal brain trusters, Rexford Tugwell he assailed as a planning red, and urban planners who dared to offer suggestions for the future of New York City. Quote, regarded in Russia as our greatest builder was how he characterized Frank Lloyd Wright. He called Louis Mumford an outspoken revolutionary. Walter Gropius, he said, was seeking to change the American system by advocating a philosophy which doesn't belong here. Planners in general, he said, are socialists, revolutionaries who do not reach the masses directly, but through the familiar subsurface activity. They teach the teachers. They reach people in high places who, in turn, influence the press, universities, societies, learned and otherwise, radio networks, the stage, the screen. But onto youthful city officials who dared to stand up to him and who had, his bloodhounds discovered, once allowed enthusiasm and naivety to lead them into membership in some organization that they later learned was a communist front. His enthusiasm for these labels was based in part on his conservative belief in the necessity for class distinctions. Oh yeah, remember his whole Oxford thesis about how everyone in government needs to be extremely well educated. Yeah, the Frank Lloyd Wright thing is so funny. So he loves class distinctions. To a man who had believed the trade unions of Mr. Walling and his socialist brethren to be blasphemy, the liberalism of the 30s was hearsay. But he also saw the effectiveness of the labels in wrecking opponents' reputations. He branded with those labels not only opponents whom he may sincerely have believed, no matter how mistakenly, to be communist, but also the opponents he was well aware were not communists and had never been. Men like Gentle Stanley Isaacs, the Republican reformer who became Manhattan Borough president in 1937, whom Moses had known for 20 years and whose only crime was that he had once been ill-advised enough to appoint brilliant young Simon Gershom to a minor position on his staff without bothering to investigate him and learn that he was an avowed communist. He branded with the labels young city officials whose dossiers, compiled by his bloodhounds, clearly revealed that while they may once, years before, have belonged to a Communist Front organization, they had long since renounced their memberships in those organizations. In applying the labels to them, he simply never bothered to mention the renunciation. If Robert Moses was a pioneer in the fields of parks and highways, he was also a pioneer in McCarthyism, 20 years before McCarthy. And his estimate of the effectiveness of his new weapon was not an overestimation. Not even the deep affection of a strong-minded and independent mayor for a young man he seemed to regard almost a son could stand before it. Not even the deep affection of a strong-minded and independent mayor for a young man he seemed to regard almost as a son could stand before it. The young man, tall and handsome and brilliant, was Paul J. Kern, LaGuardia's law secretary, and, of all his youthful aides, perhaps the one closest to the mayor. His companion on his Sunday tours of the city, and so frequent a guest at his apartment that he seemed almost a member of the family. Ironically, Kern admired Moses. Quote, "I was a Moses fanatic," he was to recall ruefully. "I was a Moses fanatic." But when, early in 1936, LaGuardia appointed him, at the age of 27, to the Municipal Civil Service Commission, he refused, as young, brilliant Robert Moses would have refused during his days with the Municipal Civil Service Commission, to allow older, changed Robert Moses to continue circumventing civil service regulations by firing Park Department employees on whim and paying favorites 2 salaries at once. And he insisted that employees of Moses's public authorities be brought under civil service regulations. I wonder if Paul Kern has a Wikipedia article. He seems to so far not have any public office, but maybe he will. There's so many. Wow, this is so interesting. There are 2 Paul Kerns that have Wikipedia articles, and one is just a U.S. Army officer, boring. But the Wikipedia article title is Paul Kern, parentheses, insomniac. That's what he's famous for. That is kind of funny. He's Hungarian, and he appears to have lied about not being able to sleep because he said that from 1915 to 1955 he didn't sleep at all. But like, sure, okay. Anyway, sorry, that was kind of a side quest. This is a different Paul Kern. He has no Wikipedia article. Wow. Also, it's awesome that the introduction for this random Paul Kern guy was tall, handsome, and brilliant. That's awesome. Imagine if you're him and like you do this interview with Robert Caro and you're like, man, I really hope I'm portrayed well in the book. And then you read the book and it's like tall, handsome, and brilliant. That would be great. First, Moses destroyed the source of Kern's power, his friendship with the mayor. He did so, Kern charges, with a tactic that would have been familiar to Ansley Wilcox and Judge Clearwater, who felt Moses had used it to discredit them with Al Smith. He lied, Kern said. He lied about me to LaGuardia. There was, Kern said, a whole series of lies that gradually poisoned his friendship with the mayor. Once, for example, Moses told LaGuardia, "Hi!
Hello.
Hi!
We brought a party.
That is so fun."
Joey got an award. Where's Bam Bam?
Andy, I got a cord.
Oh, you did? Congrats.
Where's Bam Bam?